What is going on, everybody? Welcome back to the Rantin Review Pro Wrestling, and this has been a very interesting week, a monumental week of one of many that are coming up for All Elite Wrestling. It was the debut of AEW Collision this Saturday. We also had an outstanding AEW Dynamite this past week, and we, of course, are now leading into next week for Forbidden Door. But before we get into any of that, I want to remind you guys, of course, YouTube likes your algorithm, and it likes its algorithm, and you to help the algorithm by pressing the like button, which will do things to the algorithm to let other people know about this channel and that we cover AEW, because that's what algorithms apparently do in the YouTube space. So you guys can help out the channel. I appreciate it very much. But as far as this past week in AEW, unfortunately, we have to talk about some of the concerns with the ratings, because it's going to kind of tie into the whole theme that I got out of this week from AEW. The ratings were not great for this past week's episode of Dynamite, which featured a pretty high-level main event with the Blackpool Combat Club against the Hung Bucks. Something around 700,000 people were watching. This is, of course, down from the million that they were supposed to be averaging and have been averaging for the longest time. And that is kind of tying in with the theme that I'm talking about here, is that since Brawl Out, there has been this decline in AEW, and everybody's talked about it, everybody's acknowledged it, who's going to acknowledge it. There, of course, are going to be AEW sweaties who don't, want to see anything negative about the company, but it has been an issue since Brawl Out. It's kind of funny how it also kind of coincided at the same time about last year is when the Bloodline storyline really started taking off in WWE, so it's kind of this confluence of negative events for AEW, where they are no longer the hottest wrestling company in the States. WWE has definitely had that mantle, especially, like I said, with the Bloodline storyline, which I will be talking about that in a different video. But back to All Elite Wrestling. I thought the main event on Wednesday was absolutely fantastic. That match only went 11 minutes, but it was a great match. And it ended with this kind of confluence, again, that's my word of the day, confluence. This confluence of people coming in here. So the Blackpool Combat Club loses the match, the first match that they've lost in, I think they said, a year as a team. And in comes Claudio back in the ring to beat up the Bucks. So then we're like, okay, somebody's got to make the save. And we're kind of expecting that there's going to be somebody big. But we get Eddie Kingston, of all people, comes down and makes the save. Now, Eddie's going after Claudio. Of course, those of you who've been watching Ring of Honor know that they've had a rivalry and actually goes beyond current Ring of Honor. This is one of these long-standing personal problems that Eddie Kingston has with some other wrestlers. And it all got into this big schmoz, but of course Moxley, who's also part of the Blackpool Combat Club, we know he's friends with Eddie Kingston. They have a face-off. The Bucks try to get involved, and Kingston's like, no, get out of this. This is not about y'all. This is about me and him. And they start jawing at each other. Then Takeshita comes to the ring. He's doing his, I guess he's a knockout artist now, because he's throwing a lot of closed fist punches. He's making sure you get that, you know that. So, okay, now who's coming out now? Kenny Omega comes down to the ring. Kenny makes the run in. He cleans Takeshita's clock. And just when we thought, okay, now I guess we're lining this up, here comes Will Ospreay out of nowhere with the hook kick, and then Ospreay, which got a pretty big reaction, hitting the hidden blade not once but twice on Kenny Omega, and this is all preparing for their match coming up at Forbidden Door. You can also check out my video about New Japan Explained for AEW fans. If you don't know much about Will Ospreay, there is a kind of a crash course on Will Ospreay's New Japan career on the channel as well. I thought this was fantastic, although there are a couple things coming out of this. So Kingston and Claudio are going to be continuing their rivalry, it seems, and we do have a Ring of Honor show coming up, a pay-per-view coming up, and Claudio being a Ring of Honor champion, I guess we're going to do part 2 of that, but that's also involving Moxley and the problems with Moxley and Eddie Kingston, and they're, really friends outside of the Blackpool Combat Club, but, that's a big issue. Of course, Danielson has issues and beef with Eddie Kingston as well. There's all of that. There's those dynamics going on. There was a whole story about last week where they said Kenny was he was out of the country, but he wasn't in Canada. And that made everybody think that he was going to be in Japan. He did not show up at the New Japan Dominion show last week. So it didn't suggest everybody's thinking Kota Ibushi. But we didn't get Ibushi. We got Eddie Kingston. So I think we're going to have to dig in and try to find out what the story is. We might find out over the next week or two. Are they saving this for Forbidden Door? That might be a bad thing given Kota Ibushi's history with New Japan recently. Or are they going to do it separate of the Forbidden Door stuff? And maybe that's what they're waiting for. They're going to do, if there is an issue with Kota Ibushi being on the same kind of cart where you're bringing in New Japan guys, maybe it's going to be after the Forbidden Door, and this is kind of a stopgap right now. And maybe the Eddie Kingston thing is just to kind of a red herring. Maybe they're making it look like it's going to be Eddie Kingston teaming with the Elite, which is a weird combination, to take on a Blackpool Combat Club in Blood and Guts. Now, that would be interesting, but again, watch out for a red herring. It might be a thing where Eddie, they want to do that, but Eddie goes, no, I'm not. That's not what I'm here for. I'm here for my boy John. I'm not here to do all this. And then they bring in Ibushi, and maybe that's the way they're going to do it. We'll see how they play that out. But a big week this week on AEW Dynamite. Even though the numbers don't support it, it was a damn good show from top to bottom. Speaking of the top of that, we had the Eliminator match of MJF, who took on Adam Cole, Baby. They went to a 30-minute time limit draw, which was a little bit weird because they usually do the time cues, but they didn't do the time cues. So and I guess for the dramatic effect of the bell not ringing out of nowhere. And I get why you would do that, because if that's the ending you wanted, it's very easy for guys to miss those time cues, and they could have gotten to the point where the time's not going to run out exactly when the referee's hand is coming down, before the referee's hand hits 3. So I get dramatically why they would do that, but it kind of goes against everything we've seen in AEW. We have seen, like every 3 or 4 months, they do one of these time limit draws, which is a story element. Again, in a sports-centered storyline, you want to use something like a draw to, help elevate something. It's kind of like, how dramatic it is when in a football game when two teams, at the end of the fourth quarter, it's tied and they got to go into sudden death, and sometimes you do get ties. Same thing in baseball and other sports. But this draw between MJF and Adam Cole was used to spur on another possible future match for MJF and Adam Cole. MJF's plate is filling up, however, even though he has his gimmick is to play the trolling WWE fan who just happens to be a AEW wrestler and happens to be AEW champion. That's MJF's character. Trolling the hell out of New Japan Pro Wrestling, calling it a rinky-dink indie from Japan. Which is again, that is probably what the majority of WWE sweaties think about New Japan. So he's playing that role. It is announced that he will be defending the AEW World Championship against Hiroshi Tanahashi, the Ace. I don't think you could get two more diametrically opposed people than MJF and Hiroshi Tanahashi in a match. So that's fantastic. The only thing about that is I would have kind of liked to have seen Naito involved in it, because Naito legitimately doesn't give a crap about the Forbidden Door. MJF's character is playing as if he doesn't care about the Forbidden Door, so that would have been a good matchup. Maybe next year they can do that if Naito's still wrestling by then. He's one of the guys, he's one of the biggest names in New Japan, and he just seems like he is not going to be in this Forbidden Door. He can't face Andrade El Idolo because of reasons, and I don't know. We've seen other LIJ people on there. Shingo and Hiromu was supposed to be there last year, but who knows? We'll see where this all goes down the line. We also got the announcement that SANADA will be defending the IWGP World Heavyweight Championship against Jungle Boy Jack Perry. Another interesting combination here, because the two of them are kind of similar but kind of different. SANADA is where SANADA and Jungle Boy have the similar kind of potential things. Like, there's a lot of potential currently with Jack Perry in AEW. Everybody sees a lot of potential in him, and that's been with SANADA up until just this year. For the last 6-7 years, there's all this talk about SANADA one day. He finally got there this year. He's still not all the way there, but he did finally become the IWGP World Champion this year and is running his own faction right now in New Japan. And that's kind of like an allusion to Jack Perry, who's, I hope it doesn't take Jack Perry 6 years to get there, but he's one of those guys. I think a lot of people said out of last month in that 4-way match of the Pillars, he's probably the weakest pillar. And I think he hears that stuff, and I think they're aware of that. So he's going to have Hook in his corner. Of course, for those of you who are not familiar with New Japan, SANADA has a group called Five Guys. They're called just Five Guys. Literally, that's their name. I know. But he's got 4 of the guys that are going to be backup. So I'm wondering, because you guys out there who watch my New Japan reviews know I cannot stand Tai Chi. Call him Birdface. I would love to see Hook beat the crap out of Tai Chi. If you can just give me one moment of Hook just beating the snot out of Tai Chi, I will be happy with Forbidden Door. The other one I want is the House of Black against the House of Torture, just to see the House of Black beat the living crap out of the House of Torture. So that's where we are right now. And coming out of this, we are going now into the Forbidden Door show, which is next weekend in Toronto. Again, the card so far, we got 4 official matches on the card. We have Kazuchika Okada against Bryan Danielson. Of course, the rematch from Wrestle Kingdom of Kenny Omega against Will Ospreay for the IWGP US Championship, SANADA and Jack Perry for the IWGP World Championship, and MJF defending the AEW Championship against Hiroshi Tanahashi. Probably more to come. Minoru Suzuki's going to be in town. They're all going to be in town next week. The New Japan guys will be in for Forbidden Door, so I'm sure matches are going to they're going to flesh out the rest of the card over the next couple days on social media, and probably by the end of Dynamite we should have a full, at least mostly full card for what Forbidden Door is going to look like. So we didn't get into Collision. A lot of people making notes of this interview that CM Punk had, and oh my God, it's so. But I want to say this about this. I'm going to wrap this in with CM Punk's debut on Collision, his return on Collision. I think this stuff is healthier for the wrestling, in particular for the AEW wrestling community, to kind of stop getting hyped up about this so much. Punk has said his piece in the article. He said his piece in the opening segment of Collision. He got to take his shots at the Bucks, the counterfeit Bucks line, something about their fans. He was sorry because the only thing softer than the fans that were complaining about CM Punk and wanted an apology from him are the wrestlers that those fans like.
I understand that the sheer magnitude of me makes people uncomfortable. I very much understand that my mere presence makes people uncomfortable. That's because I am the truth. Truth is painful. Hate me. You all do it because you know I'm right. You know what David Zaslav calls me? One Bill Phil. That's because I am the one true, genuine article in a business full of counterfeit bucks. Me for. I will always speak truth to power. I will always be myself. I will never compromise.
I will never compromise.
If you feel you're here today and I owe you an apology, I am sorry that the only people softer than you are the wrestlers you like.
And I think it's kind of interesting now, this new little wrinkle in it. Punk's been gone, but he left as AEW champion and nobody ever pinned him for it. MJF is the current AEW champion. Is that Collision going to be at All In or All Out? We're going to have to wait and see. But Punk got his stuff off of his chest. There are Elite fans, and I'm a fan of CM Punk and I'm a fan of the Elite. It for me is really kind of annoying. I want them to get along because they're two of my favorite kinds of wrestlers. Both of them buck the system, literally, and try to do something outside of the one big company, WWE. These are the two entities that are most responsible for even getting the ball rolling to us having an AEW and having a second wrestling company and the rest of the pro wrestling world outside of WWE having some life in it again and having a lot of money poured into it. It's been a very long time since there was any money in North America poured into a wrestling company like this that wasn't called WWE. So hopefully Punk and the Bucks understand this. And I'm with a lot of people. I think right now, no, there's not going to be a match with the Punk against the Elite in any fashion or form, but I do think in the future it's possible. Anything's possible in wrestling. Remember, we saw Bret Hart versus Vince McMahon in the WrestleMania match. That's better forgotten as a match because it was a terrible match, but it's just what I'm saying. it could happen. Let's just hope it doesn't take 17 years for us to see CM Punk, like a 60-year-old CM Punk against a 50-year-old Kenny Omega or something. Let's not have to get to that kind of. Let's not wait that long. If they're going to do it within, I would say, within 1 year. If you want to do another stadium show next year, that would be something to headline with. The rest of Collision I thought was great. I feel bad for Wardlow. He lost the TNT Championship to Luchasaurus. Poor Wardlow cannot keep this TNT title to save his life. Christian Cage was hysterical after the match because he's holding the belt up like he won it. But he actually technically did win it because it was his shot with the camera that knocked out Wardlow that allowed Luchasaurus to get the pin. So we have that. We have a lot of interviews and the debuts, re-debuts of Powerhouse Hobbs. We have Ricky Starks declaring himself for the Owen Hart tournament. We have a lot of new old faces being made new again. Miro took on Tony Nese tonight. Miro got a hero's welcome. Andrade El Idolo took on Buddy Murphy. Matthews, I can't remember which one is his WWE name or not. He took on Buddy from the House of Black. So you had Charlotte's husband against Rhea Ripley's boyfriend. So there you go. And funny enough, which was a great match. I think it was the best match of the night was between these two. And Andrade wins the match using the figure 8, his wife's finishing move, to get Buddy Matthews to tap out. Then we get a little bit of a House of Black gang up on Andrade. But Andrade does have a faction. So him getting, oh my God, Roosh Vance in there with him in this for the Trios Championships against the House of Black. That would be a very hard. Oh my God, I'm thinking already. Roosh opposite of freaking Brody King. Yeah, give me that all day long. So that looks like the direction we're going with the Trios Championships right now. We had by the way, happy Father's Day to all the fathers out there, including Daddy Ass, who he and the Acclaim staked their claim, saying that AEW now stands for all acclaimed every Wednesday and now acclaimed every weekend. And they did a 4-way scissoring with Tony Schiavone, who was in the ring, Lois might not be happy about her husband scissoring 3 grown men on live television at the same time, but hey, maybe they're kinky. I don't know. Lois rules, as Eddie Kingston's shirt said. So, but honestly, there were quite a few enjoyable things on the show. Finishing off with the main event, CM Punk and FTR, CM-FTR. There was even a CM-FTR chant out here tonight, along with some F the Elite chants earlier on the night as well. But they were teaming up to take on the team of Bullet Club Gold, Jay White, and Juice Robinson, and they were to be teaming up with Samoa Joe. Not great cohesion there between Samoa Joe and the Bullet Club guys, but this was just a sight to see. I enjoyed seeing obviously Punk and Joe share a ring again. I'm very curious to see the interaction with Jay White and CM Punk. It has been rumored that CM Punk wants a feud with Jay White because he likes Jay White's style. For AEW fans who haven't seen Jay White before, you're not even you guys haven't seen a smidget of what he's really like. I mean, Jay White was known in New Japan. He was a terror. He was a devious, calculating, manipulative individual, and you have not seen him get into that stuff here in AEW. And him going in there against guys like CM Punk, you're in for it in the future, whatever was coming down the pike. I think they made the right decision in this match. Punk was kind of limited in it. Mostly was FTR, Jay White, and Juice doing most of the heavy lifting. We did get some interactions with Punk and Joe. Again, this harkens back to the Ring of Honor trilogy that they had several years ago. And this is the first time I think they've met each other. And a lot of first times this week, too. We got on Dynamite the first time Sting and Chris Jericho are going to start a program with each other. A lot of firsts. So this was another one. First time in 20 some odd years. I think Kevin Kelly, who said 6,000 some odd days since that happened, since the last time Joe and Punk shared a ring together. But that wasn't it was kind of the main focus of the match, but not really. It broke down into a typical trios match kind of style. Jay White got obliterated by near the end of the match. He should have been pinned. They got FTR and CM Punk pretty much creamed him with the Power and Glory suplex, and then Punk followed up with his horrible elbow drop. But Juice made the save. We got more of Samoa Joe coming in, wrecking everybody. I will say this too: they're making their monsters look really good on this show. By the way, it's Joe. Not Wardlow, Joe and Miro in particular looked really, really, really amazing and impressive on this show. CM Punk finally gets the win at the end of the day, pinning Juice Robinson. He was the only person who could have taken a pin in this match. You're not going to have FTR take a pin. You're not going to have CM Punk lose his first match. You want to save Joe and Punk for later on, and Jay White, you do not want Jay White taking a pin in a tag match. Juice, unfortunately, hey, it's okay. Juice is Juice, man. He can take it. He took the pin on this match. Fun show all around with Collision. I enjoyed it. It looked like it was shot a bit differently than Dynamite. It had a little bit of a different look. I don't know if that's just because, I don't know what it is. It looks like they're using different cameras or whatever, but there was a subtle difference in the way, just the presentation of the show. It wasn't a dramatic change from what you see on Dynamite, but tonally, there's just something unique about Collision. It does feel different from Dynamite, but it also still feels like a big show. The staging is it's a great stage. It's also screens and everything else, keeping with modern wrestling tropes and everything else. So overall, I think the vibe of the show was interesting. It's you don't see, and you already can kind of see the difference. A lot more traditional kind of wrestling on this show. Not a lot of high-flying, high-heavy spot stuff. Given what we hear about the creative behind the show and the people on it and the people not on it, it'd be funny if Collision and Dynamite actually do wind up feeling more like two different brands than SmackDown and Raw ever have. Because I'm already seeing kind of the feel and there's a difference between the two. It's like when I watch clips of Raw and SmackDown, sometimes I don't even know what show I'm watching. I'm just watching shows with clips on it. And like, especially if, Roman Reigns is on Raw and I'm watching it, outside of just, if it wasn't for all them flashing the logo on the screen all the time, I wouldn't be able to tell the difference between the shows. Collision so far, it's only the first night, so we'll see how well this goes in the future if they can maintain this. It does have a slightly different vibe than Dynamite. So I think this was a rousing success. Online, apparently a lot of people really enjoyed the show. I enjoyed the show. And no Kenta, unfortunately, no Kota Ibushi still, and nothing really about Forbidden Door pay-per-view coming up. But I think the main focus of this Collision show was to focus on Collision. Of course, next week is the go-home show for the Forbidden Door show, and this will all be up in Toronto. CM Punk in Toronto. We're going to have to see how that goes. He got a big Heroes Welcome here in Chicago, but, even though Toronto was at Winnipeg, Kenny Omega's from Winnipeg, but there is kind of this thing with Canadians. They love their homegrown talent, and anybody who's feuding with the homegrown talent is the enemy. So are we going to get a new Canada-USA war? Are we literally going back to 1997? I've said this before. There's a lot of AEW that feels like 1997 WWF. For those of you who are around and remember that time, if you remember how that felt, it felt a lot like what's going on with this Elite Punk thing. But again, pretty good week for AEW. I think they had just shy of 10,000 people. Obviously not the sellout it was for the first dance when Punk came back, but I think it was a good showing. And we'll have to see what the ratings are for it. I mean, ratings don't really matter. Attendances don't matter. All that matters is really the TV deals, because that's where the majority of the money's coming from. But I do think, of course, they do have to get a good number. Some people complain about that. They're like, AEW, well, if they only do 500,000, that's terrible. That's horrible. I'm like, you have to remember, guys, and I keep saying this. Let's take a comparison. The WNBA, which, is not very popular either. They pump millions and millions and millions and millions of dollars into the WNBA. The average viewership on a WNBA game is about 300,000 people. AEW is more viable, has almost twice to three times the viewership of the WNBA, which corporations are pouring money into. So keep that in mind when you think about the ratings and the money, and you get people start talking about business and stuff. We don't know. there's stuff that people are doing. Even CM Punk said that the head of Warner Discovery calls him Dollar Bill Phil, and that was in reference. Of course, that was just him trying to get into taking that counterfeit buckshot. But yeah, that counterfeit buckshot got the Bucks and Hangman in the same note there. But yeah, I think it's fine. If you're mad about it, again, like I said, the Elite, they made fun of CM Punk during the Trios Best of 7 series last year. So, this is CM Punk's receipt, maybe for that, maybe for other things. Hopefully this is the end of it. We don't have to focus on it anymore. The Bucks did take a little cheeky shot back at it on their Twitter, and all they said was that, oh yeah, if it was 2018, they'd have already had counterfeit Bucks t-shirts on Pro Wrestling Tees, which they would have, because they got a cease and desist from WWE. That t-shirt, cease and desist t-shirt, was out the next day, and they made buku bucks off of it. And because that's what the Bucks are, because that's the funny thing about the Bucks, they're just as snarky as CM Punk, just in a different way. The Bucks will take something like that, and they'll go say, all right, you're going to call us that. We're going to make, a couple $100,000 off of you doing that by making up t-shirts for it. So there you go. But I want to know what you guys thought about this week in AEW. What do you think about Dynamite? What do you think about the conclusion? What do you think about the card for Forbidden Door and what the build has been? I think it's a lot better this year than last year. And how did you like Collision? Will you be watching it every week? I know I won't. I won't be watching it every week live. I'll probably be watching DVR on Sunday mornings. But even at that, it's going to be exciting. And there will be weeks that I will catch it on a Saturday night. But I like many people, I can't imagine doing this every single Saturday, watching Collision, but I definitely will be watching it here and there. And obviously, I guess the DVR numbers count too. So there you go. But it's definitely a show worth watching again in the future. No setup for next week, but I'm sure we'll hear about it on Dynamite on Wednesday. But again, let me know what you guys thought in the comment box below. Again, remember, got the New Japan Explained videos. There will be a series of those coming up for those of you who are AEW fans who haven't watched a lot of New Japan. And until then, I will see you guys here for more news, rumors, and commentary on the Rantin Review Pro Wrestling. Have a good day.